hope for making multilateralism great again. So thank you so much, and we move on to our next honorable. He's the Undersecretary General from the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, in short, DESA. May I ask you to speak to us? Thank you so much.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, for inviting DESA to join with other speakers to share a few thoughts. Thank you very much, Vice Minister, for your opening remarks. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear colleagues, it is in a very critical moment for all of us to gather in this beautiful city to kick off our discussion process, lead up to the December event in Abu Dhabi for the 2026 UN Water Conference. Well, actually, we had laid down a very solid foundation for the global water agenda from the 2023, the UN Water Conference. But from the 23 to 26, we witnessed enormous changes from the global agenda, from the global geopolitical landscape. So this is a critical step to strengthen our collective action on water across the UN system and beyond. As previous speakers highlighted, water cuts across nearly every global priority, from climate action, biodiversity, to health, food system, energy, and disaster risk reduction. However, despite its centrality, water issues remain too fragmented across the policies and the institutions. This interactive dialogue here calls upon us to address the challenges head on. We must answer the two fundamental questions. First, how can water be effectively integrated into the multilateral processes? Second, how can cooperation on water strengthen the multilateralism itself? Momentum is building. We have seen growing the recognition of the water cross-cutting role, driven by the outcomes of the 2023 UN Water Conference. The work of the UN Water and the appointment of the Secretary General Special Envoy on Water. At the same time, we face the global pressures from geopolitical tensions to physical constraints. In this context, water can and must serve as a unifying force, and it offers a practical entry point to align all commitments into coordinated actions at all levels. Inputs from this dialogue highlight progress, but it also persistent challenges. While water is increasingly referenced in the global frameworks, there is a fragmentation with limited coherence, coordination, and follow-up. Bridging the gap between the political commitments and the on-the-ground implementation will be essential as we accelerate towards 2030 and consider the water in the multilateral processes beyond the existing mandates. So, Dhabi.
Proliferation. It's important to note as well that some expressed explicit opposition to new or expanded intergovernmental bodies. Notwithstanding these differing perspectives, there is broad recognition of the importance of sustaining strong positioning for water, not only in the next few years, but also beyond 2030. This dialogue is inherently cross-cutting and intersects with all the other themes. You can see on the screen an overview of different intersections which in one way or the other interact with the conversation on multilateral architecture, coherence and coordination. These themes are important to be taken into account, while recognizing, of course, that other interactive dialogues and roundtables during these 2 days engage more deeply with them. So finally, here are the 5 guiding questions proposed for today's discussion. They are structured around the following. 1. Positioning and integration of water across multilateral processes. 2. Learning and good practices from other policy domains. 3. Governance, accountability, and follow-up. 4. Support to means of implementation, including finance, data, and capacity. And 5. The post-2030 positioning of water in global governance. We hope these questions will provide for an engaging conversation. Thank you, and back to you, dear moderator.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Müller, for pointing out that indeed, amongst others, fragmentation is one of the huge obstacles, and for phrasing the guiding questions. And I'm very happy that we're now transitioning finally to the moment where we will be filling the seats on the stage here. And we will be starting our... And my mic did not go off, thank you. I'm very happy that I can hand over now the moderation to Professor Kenzo Hiroki, whom I would like onto the stage as the first person. Professor Kenzo Hiroki is the high-level experts and leaders panel representative on water and disasters, HELP, and he's also a national graduate of the Institute for Policy Studies, GRIPS. Kenzo, I'm very honored to know you here today, and thank you so much for being here, and I would like to hand over directly to you so that you may call our guests and speakers onto the stage. Thank you, Kenzo.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody, and good day for everybody, because we are now having the day 1 for the process towards 2026 Water Conference. Now, I'd like to invite distinguished panelists of this IDE, Water in Multilateral Process. I'd like to invite His Excellency Mr. Moses Bilakati. He is African Union Commissioner for Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy, and Sustainable Environment. Please come to the stage. And I'd like to invite Ms. Maike van Ginneken, Water Envoy for the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Mr. Hotam Kurbonzoda, Deputy Permanent Representative, Tajikistan Mission to the United Nations. Welcome. And Mr. Tito Livio Pereira Queiroz y Silva, Deputy Executive Secretary, Ministry of Integration and Regional Development of Brazil. Welcome. Ms. Sophie Sandstrom, Permanent Observer of IUCN to the United Nations, New York. Welcome. Okay. So now, let's start panel discussion. First of all, I'm quite refreshed. I felt in 2023, when the 2023 Water Conference was started. Is it coming? Okay. The mics are afraid of me. Okay. In the 2023, when there was the UN Water Conference, I felt like that the clock, which was dormant for 46 years, started again. So the new era has started. And indeed, it quickly produced many results, like appointment of special envoy of the United Nations Secretary General, Ms. Malsudi is here, to push us to do more. And she is today also pushing us to do more. And also, UN system-wide strategy is done, and follow-up process is ongoing. So we have many things starting. But at the same time, we realize that maybe we are still in the business as usual in terms of the water conference processes. Maybe it's time to rethink deep about what we can do to improve our own discussion processes. That is why the member state decided to renew our idea by having the IDE in this 26th conference. So there are 5 guiding questions. And I like to ask each of the panelists appropriate question to be answered. First of all, I'd like to ask Mr. Moses Pilakati, African Union Commissioner, to answer the first question. The first question is, this is a bit complicated. Simply, I would say, water is positioned in the many processes, but with little mutual impacts. So how can we improve this? I'd like to hear from you about this.
Thank you very much. Uh-oh. It's okay? Yeah, this one's better. Yeah. No, thank you very much, moderator. And thank you for inviting the African Union Commission to this interactive dialogue on water in multilateral processes. I think I would like to share Africa's water realities that require multilateral processes. First, we have a challenge with the access gaps, where over 400 million Africans lack access to safe drinking water and about 700 million lack adequate sanitation. This situation requires collective and multilateral actions at regional as well as at global level. Secondly, climate vulnerability. Africa is disproportionately affected by climate change impacts, which are droughts, floods, and increasing water scarcity, which requires global and regional resilience strategies and strengthened multilateral actions. These are a challenge because on the one hand, you have got floods, which is bringing in lots of water, and unfortunately, you end up not even accessing that water, which means we need ways and means to strengthen our multilateral actions. I think the third one is related to transboundary waters. 63 transboundary river basins cover about 64% of Africa's land, making cooperation even more essential. The transboundary nature of rivers, aquifers, ecosystems requires collective governance and coordinated management across national borders. In fact, water doesn't respect borders. So there is a need for sharing of these natural resources, as well as ensuring that we can work together. But I think the last one is inadequate sector financing and investment, which is very, very critical. Financing and infrastructure deficits provide opportunities for joint investments. Africa needs close to $45 billion per annum to actually meet its water obligations. Where do we get that? And I think I'm proposing the issue of blended finance for public-private partnerships, climate funds such as green climate funds, which require strong multilateral processes and coordination. This, I think, would assist us to move forward when it comes to multilateralism. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I fully agree with you, and thank you very much for sharing the real situation in Africa. Because Ms. Marusudi said that we should not forget about the people down on the ground. Then, how can multilateral processes help those people on the ground to improve their own lives? Is a strong message from you. Thank you very much. And then next, I'd like to ask a question from for Ms. Maike van Kinegen, Maike-san. Second question. Simply, we need better water integration governance. Any lessons learned from the current process to make this happen?
Thank you very much. Quisiera agradecer a México y Alemania por su liderazgo en el diálogo interactivo sobre el agua y los procesos multilaterales. Muchas gracias, vielen Dank. Espero tener a nuestros amigos mexicanos con nosotros en persona la próxima vez que nos encontremos. I'll continue in English, and I have some notes because I think this is a confusing time and I want to be precise. I'm a true multilateralist. I've worked my whole life in multilateral institutions, in development banks, in the United Nations, and in multi-stakeholder frameworks. And only in the past 2 years have I worked for government, by definition my own government, that's how it works. And we're in the middle of a period in which multilateralism is under threat. I think Reto Masudi already talked about it. And it pains me deeply at a personal and professional level to see these threats to the multilateral system, to the rule-based order, the geopolitical system that I work in, that we all work in, that we're part of. We all saw the speech of Mark Carney last week. This is a rupture, not a transition. And I also see how budget cuts for international cooperation in many countries, including my own, reduce the work that multilateral organizations can do to fight poverty, and how poor communities are at risk of being left behind. So it's very comfortable to be here among water friends, to be in our safe water bubble, and to discuss how we continue our incremental process that we've been working on together for the past years. But I also think there's a real risk that we're too comfortable here in this room, that we ignore the strong trends that are happening out there, and we miss the connection with what's happening politically and the threats to multilateralism. I'm proud at how the 2023 UN Water Conference brought water back at the center of global political attention, and I would like to shout out to our brothers and sisters of the Republic of Tajikistan. We really did this together as co-host and together with all of you here in this room and beyond. And I think that after the 2023 Water Conference, we made a lot of progress on water on the multilateral stage. A group of member states at the UN, our group of water friends, worked hard on a resolution to anchor water further in the UN system. We didn't get as far as we wanted, a negotiated text, a regular process, but we did get this conference and the one in 2028, so we made incremental progress. Several other speakers have already mentioned other progress we've made, the UN Special Envoy, the UN system-wide strategy of water and sanitation. But I think there's much more good news and progress we've made in this difficult multilateral system. Also because the multilateral system is more than the UN. There's other organizations that play important roles. So the Global Commission on the Economics of Water fostered a whole of water cycle approach in the new World Bank strategy, World Bank Group strategy on water, and on the recent EU Water Resilience Strategy. You heard yesterday from Varosh how multilateral development banks are joining forces with philanthropies and bilateral through Mission Water, with a great ambition of supporting water security for 1 billion people. That's a great step forward in our multilateral system. We also heard yesterday from Alvaro the glass report, a tradition that we get back every 2 years and that I think is already an important part of the role that the UN plays in reliable data in our joint efforts against disinformation, and as Retno just said, in benchmarking progress from time to time. We have those systems in place. And I'm very happy to see that new countries are emerging as water leaders. The Netherlands has played this role for a long time, but we're happy to see countries like the UAE, like Indonesia, like Saudi Arabia, joining this movement because we need everybody. And I would like to congratulate Africa being in the lead. The Republic of South Africa as G20 president, and also the African Union with the 2026 year of water. All of those are multilateral achievements that we can build on. So together we can do that. So let's continue with this in the next round that we're in now. We need to join forces between mid-sized countries, as Carney said, between mid-sized countries and small countries, because otherwise the big countries will just do it on their own. And multilateralism is all of us. It is what we make of it. And as I think Alvaro Lazo also referred to yesterday, multilateral organizations are as good as member states allow them to be. So it's really on member states or shareholders in the Multilateral Development Bank to really make this happen. And I think as water advocates and water professionals, we need to connect with the broader processes that will define multilateralism for decades to come. So, I have 5 points, and I'm sorry I'm going a little bit over time, Kenzo-san, that I think are important to take into account from here to Abu Dhabi. And the first one, and I think this is also what the Commissioner said, we need to show results. We all need to go back and say why we go to these big conferences, what's the impact on the ground, and we need to tell the story of how global gatherings like today have an impact. This is also why we plan to join Mission Water, because it has impact on the ground. And really, that needs to be our North Star. Second, I think that this interactive dialogue needs to consider the multilateral system as a whole. The UN is at the core of this, but there's many other actors. I mentioned the Multilateral Development Bank, the African Union. We're a proud member of the European Union. And I think all of those have a role to play. And if we talk about a mandate for a dedicated regular water progress beyond the 2020 UN conference, this will need to fit into this landscape. We are excited that 73 countries endorsed and participate in the Baku Water and Climate Dialogue to embed water in the Rio Convention. We've come a long way in that. We love to work on wetlands of the Ramsar Convention, the work on disaster risk reduction under the Sendai framework. I think we're in an era of consolidation rather than expansion. So how can we further combine these efforts on disaster risk reduction, climate adaptation and water, and make use of all these existing instruments? We're all member states of all these conventions. The third one is we need to be efficient in the process between now and Abu Dhabi. I think and I hope that the co-hosts of the conference, Senegal and the UEA, and the co-chairs of the interactive dialogues can come up with an efficient roadmap between you and Abu Dhabi pretty soon. Because yes, we need to come together, but let's avoid becoming a traveling circus. There's work to be done between those gatherings to digest the inputs we get and to do the work to come up with concrete proposals. We're happy to get some homework, so please let us know how we can help also between these convenings. We need to anticipate and contribute to the broader reforms of the multilateral system. I think that's the elephant in the room, no? The UN 80 reforms are underway. Multilateral organizations are often downsizing and reorienting. I saw fragmentation as the biggest word in the word cloud there. The reforms are an opportunity to consolidate. Let's deduct layers and mechanisms instead of adding them. And member states are in the lead here. We have the responsibility to help the multilateral system to actually do this in an organized manner. But that means that we also need to bring in our colleagues in our member states that actually work on these broader reforms. We cannot stay in the water bubble, also in that within our own governments. And the last one, Kenzo-san, all member states need to have a voice. It concerned me yesterday that there were a lot of member seats that were empty. We're here in force with European countries. We're here in force with multilateral systems. But where are all the member states? Let's make sure that everybody has a voice. How do we involve country governments who own the multilateral system together in this process up to Abu Dhabi in December, especially on this interactive dialogue on multilateral processes? Because country governments are at the helm to avoid a rupture and to secure a smooth transition of the multilateral system in which water is central. So water connects us all. Let's be bold and let's unite the world for water. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I started with a rather pessimistic question that the multilateralism is in crisis. But you mentioned a lot of positive things, like a new member states are joining us as a quite prominent water force and so forth. And you have already mentioned that 5 efficient ways to improve, like result-oriented 2026 conference, the inclusion of the multilateral organizations, and also roadmap to be created as early as possible, and reforming while downsizing. And finally, member states to join us, and then we should open the doors for them. Thank you very much for these useful suggestions. Now I'd like to ask the third question to Mr. Hotam. The question is also very simple. Many multilateral water processes are running in parallel. Is there any way to streamline them?
Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator. Excellencies, distinguished co-chairs, dear colleagues, allow me at the outset to congratulate and to express our sincere appreciation to the government of Germany and Mexico for their leadership and co-chairing this very important interactive dialogue. I also wish to thank to the government of Senegal for convening this very timely and important event and for their warm hospitality. Water challenges today are global, interconnected, and increasingly urgent. More than 2 billion people still lack access to safely managed drinking water, and nearly 2/3 of world population experience water scarcity during at least 1 month each year. These realities remind us that water is not a sectorial issue, but defining the challenge for sustainable development and resilience. That is precisely why we must now shift decisively from the commitments to the implementation. The International Decade for Action Water for Sustainable Development 2018 and 2028, and the outcomes of the 2023 UN Water Conference, which proudly co-hosted by the government of Netherlands and Tajikistan, have provided a strong political foundation. The launch of the Water Action Agenda with more than 800 commitments demonstrated unprecedented collective ambition. Our shared responsibility today is to ensure that these commitments translate into the tangible results on the ground. And colleagues, also here we heard about the upcoming opportunities, which we think is very important. The coming period offers important opportunities to accelerate progress. This high-level preparatory meeting in Dakar provides a strong and timely starting point on the road to 2026. In addition, in 19 March 2026, Tajikistan, in cooperation with the UN Water, UN DESA, and UN Women and other partners, member states, will convene a high-level meeting in New York to mark World Water Day. This observance will further highlight global water challenges, showcase solutions, and reinforce the central role of water within the multilateral processes. Against this backdrop, I would like to draw attention to the Dushanbe water process, including fourth Dushanbe Water Action Decade Conference to be convened by Tajikistan from 25th to 28th May 2026. This conference will serve as an inclusive platform to review progress under the Water Action Agenda, support preparation UN Water Conference 2026, and facilitate solution-oriented dialogue among all stakeholders. Next, we will carry this momentum through SDG 6 at the high-level political forum in July in New York. At the same time, I would like to emphasize the role and importance contribution of existing international and regional platforms in Europe, in Asia, Middle East. Those engagement will be essential in supporting the 2026 United Nations Water Conference and maintaining momentum on water beyond 2026 and 2028. Distinguished colleagues, in this regard, Tajikistan fully committed to advance global advocacy by convening inclusive multilateral platforms, supporting implementation of all these global commitments, and promoting the integration of water across climate and development agendas. We will definitely continue working closely with all co-chairs of the interactive dialogues of the 2026 United Nations Water Conference, as well as with relevant UN entities and partners to strengthen coherence, follow-up, and accountability across multilateral water processes. In this spirit, we're pleased to invite all co-chairs of the interactive dialogue to Tajikistan for the fourth Dushanbe Water Action Decade Conference in May 2026. It would be a key platform, preparatory meeting, and a key platform for further develop their review and mobilize people. Excellencies, the 2028 United Nations Water Conference to be hosted by Tajikistan in Dushanbe will mark final comprehensive review of the Water Action Decade. Importantly, it will also serve as a strategic bridge towards the post-2030 global water agenda. Already in our discussion in May 2026 in Dushanbe, we intend to place strong emphasis on the long-term perspective, recognizing that cooperation on water does not end with the timelines of our current frameworks. In conclusion, water must remain firmly anchored in multilateral processes. Tajikistan stands ready to work closely with all partners and to ensure that water continues to serve as a bridge for cooperation, resilience, and sustainable development. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Hotam-san. You reminded us that the 23 Water Conference was started as a part of the Decade for Action. For that, I really appreciate the leadership of the Tajikistan for that. And also, you mentioned a number of the important events. To my question that how we can streamline those processes, your answer was how we can make use of these processes at maximum. That is the first step we should take while thinking about how we can coordinate those conferences processes. And you mentioned that the 28th conference leading from the Dushanbe process. That is also very important when we think about 26th conference, because we are having 28 also. This is a very important sequence for all the water people and member states. Thank you very much. Now, the fourth question is, how can multi-water processes be improved to bring more money, more knowledge, and more capacity? So that is a question to Mr. Tito-san. Your turn.
Thank you, Professor Kenzo. Distinguished delegates, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the United Nations and the governments of Senegal and the United Arab Emirates, and also Germany and Mexico, for convening this dialogue as we prepare for the 2026 UN Water Conference. As we all know, water is a cross-cutting issue. It is central to sustainable development, food security, health, clear energy, and climate adaptation. With this understanding, Brazil has joined this process with a strong commitment to accelerating the implementation of SDG 6 by integrating water, climate, development, and social justice. We firmly believe in strengthening multilateralism to promote more inclusive and effective water governance. But we also see a clear need to better connect multilateral processes with people's lives. During the stakeholders meeting this last Sunday, we heard a shared message. Inclusiveness is not only about giving voice, but about revisiting governance arrangements so that different actors can co-create solutions based on real territorial challenges. In Brazil, water is treated as a structural pillar of development within a participatory governance framework. By law, we have established a National Water Resources Council that brings together federal and local governments, basin committees, water users, and civil society. Also, we put focus on basin committees as fundamental element for decisions on the ground. Within the scope of the global mobilization, the Mutirão Global, which aims to engage all stakeholders in delivering concrete actions on the ground, COP30 launched the action agenda with acceleration plans. These plans include water governance, water security, sanitation, and disaster risk reduction. They operationalize international commitments through integrated planning and policy alignment, offering a practical model for mainstreaming water-related goals across different nations. These acceleration plans are concrete instruments that can be used to fast-track SDG 6 targets. We view them as structural contributions to the interactive dialogues themes of the 2026 UN Water Conference. As living documents, they remain open to scale, improvement, adaptation, and partnership. Brazil also recognizes the important role of multilateral process in closing financing gaps, a point strongly emphasized in many discussions here in Dakar. Accelerating implementation requires not only better coordination, but a significant increase in dedicated resources. Although most of existing environment financing mechanisms play an important role in climate change mitigation, they do not always dedicate enough resources to cover other critical needs on water, such as water governance, water security, universal access to sanitation, and some specific capacity building needs. Furthermore, available funds sometimes fail to reach those responsible for implementing water public policies on the ground. From Brazil's perspective, there is a clear need to both scale up and broaden financial resources dedicated to water, as well as establishing effective mechanisms to ensure that these resources reach the different types of implementers of public policies, ensuring they translate into concrete and inclusive outcomes. Strengthening water finance has a strong multiplier effect for climate resilience, food security, among other related areas. So it's crucial that these resources are linked to existing commitments and translated into national and local action. Enhanced coordination among multilateral funds and partners is key to achieving efficiency, scale, and lasting results. Finally, we need to connect political commitments with concrete actions through clearer links between targets, monitoring, and accountability. This includes developing integrated ways to track water-related commitments across different international conventions. Thank you very much, moderator.
Thank you very much, Tito-san. It seems that from your good example of Brazil, your country is connecting the national policy for water governance and international policy. And both of them, have been interacting to, elevate their level of the commitment, including resource mobilization. This is one of the superb examples of how multilateralism can be connected to national reform and national governance improvement. Thank you very, very much. Now, the fifth question is what is the position of water and shape of the multilateral water processes in post-2030, which is a big question to you. So I'd like to ask Sophie-san to answer the question.
Thank you very much, Chair. And first of all, let me express the gratitude of IUCN to the co-host of the Water Conference, United Arab Emirates and Senegal, for your visionary and really inclusive leadership in this process, which we so much appreciate. And of course, a big thank you to Senegal for your warm hospitality, as well as congratulations to Germany and Mexico on your appointment as co-chairs of this dialogue. It's clear that water is far too important a topic for us to wait and see what's going to happen with the post-2030 agenda. We've heard a lot already today about the challenges of the multilateral system and what we can expect from that. And there's clear convergence on the point that we need to do something to address the gap in the global water governance system. Most recently, last week, the Global Water Bankruptcy Report was launched, and it said very clearly that our current fragmented global water governance system is simply not fit for purpose anymore. Unlike climate change, land degradation, and biodiversity loss, water has no dedicated multilateral governance regime, despite the fact that this is the primary transmission channel through which these crises manifest. This absence creates a water-shaped governance vacuum at the very heart of the global sustainability agenda. It's important, of course, to emphasize that we have several important conventions on water, such as the UN Water Convention, the Ramsar Convention, but despite this, there is no comprehensive global agreement on water that would cover the range of the topics that these interactive dialogues discuss. That would also cover all levels from the local to the global and all forms of water ecosystems. We've heard already from many speakers, we don't have a current regular intergovernmental process for water, and there's no institutional architecture to support countries in managing their water resources. We have, simply put, no universally adopted framework that would outline the shared principles for the management, use, and allocation of water. But we've also heard today several times that there is reason for cautious optimism, and I'm not going to repeat all those achievements that we've seen on the water agenda in the last few years, but just to reiterate that that momentum, which we've heard about today, is real, but also momentum doesn't sustain itself. A moment doesn't seize itself. If we're serious about addressing the gaps in global water governance, someone must step forward to translate that momentum into structure. We must look beyond our narrow short-term interests and recognize the shared benefits of multilateral governance that reflects the interconnected nature of water systems themselves. Now, what could that governance system look like? It could, for instance, take the shape of a global framework for water that would include regular intergovernmental meetings on water to maintain political attention. It would include also inclusive multi-stakeholder mechanisms to support implementation, monitoring, and accountability, and of course also a dedicated financing mechanism aligned with commitments. This governance framework has to be developed, of course, through an intergovernmental process led by member states. We've heard many times that this is a very challenging moment to achieve anything new in the multilateral system. My first degree is actually in political history of all things. And when I look back at the moment when the UN was created, I think, well, our times are challenging, but they were a lot worse back then. So we can create something new. Moments of upheaval can also be moments of opportunity. And one important point I really want to emphasize, we do not need to have all the answers ready to begin a process. The important thing is to take each step by step and continue that process, continue the dialogue. A very pragmatic first step, for instance, and now I'm geeking out on UN procedures, but that's my job, could be the establishment of an intergovernmental working group mandated by the General Assembly to explore options for strengthening global water governance, and then to have these recommendations by the working group presented at the next UN Water Conference. And as we are in a country of African champions, I want to stop with a football analogy. Our basic task right now is to keep the ball in play to the 2026 Water Conference and beyond, find the right players to pass it on to, and build toward that moment when finally we can hit the goal. And as Senegal knows very well, sometimes you only need one goal to win the game. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for pointing out some of the gaps we have to make our water governance, global water governance fuller. And also thank you for suggesting some concrete ideas and also a way forward to reach our goal of better water governance system. And I want to have one more goal. Thank you very much for the speakers. We had a very good interventions, and I'm quite glad that I could feel, had an answer for all the 5 questions posed by the organizer. And the discussion will continue under the moderatorship of the Mariam Sam. But I'm sure that we had a lot of hints through these good, excellent interventions for you to think and act for better water governance. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all the panelists for your profound and valuable insights, bridging the gap between the past and the future in water terms and beyond. And thank you so much for Kenzo for your wonderful moderation. Again, a warm round of applause also for our moderator. So we have now heard from selected experts, but these dialogues need to be shaped by all of you. And as Maike just said, multilateralism is what we make out of it. And now is the time to start. We want to base our plenary discussion on some guiding questions which we are sharing with you on the screen, to my left, to my right. Which priority topics, emerging issues and areas of action should be the focus for this interactive dialogue theme? Second, what should be the key messages targeted to policy and decision makers and also to other stakeholders? And finally, how can preparation of this interactive dialogue be dynamic, collaborative, and inclusive, a buzzword we need to fill with life? For this part of today's session, we will use, like throughout the yesterday's session, a 4x4 format. So 4 member states from the audience can make their intervention and will be followed by 4 stakeholders. Each intervention should not be longer than 2 minutes, and please respect the time to enable all the speakers to make their point. The time will be projected on the screen, so it's not just me being strict. Those wishing to take the floor can raise their hands or countries, and we will take as many of you as possible during the allotted time. And I hope I will be assisted, because I'm not sure if I can see all of you. It's wonderful to be in such a great and full room, but I wear glasses, and even with glasses, it's hard to see all of you. So I have a quick glance throughout the room. Wonderful. Some people are already standing up. Wow. I really appreciate to see so many of you wanting to speak. I may not be able to allow all of you to take the floor, but I will try my best. So let us start with somebody that represents many states at the same time. The European Union, please. And we need a microphone. Wonderful, thank you.
Co-chairs, excellencies, the European Union believes the 2026 conference must mark the transition from a sector to water as a cross-cutting priority. The EU's goal is to work with all partners towards concrete and tangible results to accelerate the achievement and implementation of SDG 6. And we will present for the European Union a progress report on implementation of our commitments to the Water Action Agenda, and we encourage all other partners to do the same. Because only with accountability can we see progress and the necessary new actions. And as we've heard from the panel, the second priority is strengthening global water governance with clear priorities and engaging in discussions on the future global water governance framework. Beyond 2030, we should strive for a permanent intergovernmental process for water inspired by what we already have for climate, biodiversity and desertification to ensure long-term monitoring and mandate coherence across the UN system. We need to strengthen UN water to ensure that the UN system-wide strategy on water is fully implemented and to ensure the continuation of the role of the excellent work of the UN Secretary-General's Special Envoy. With bold vision for water resilience globally, we need to explore new opportunities for collaboration between businesses, researchers and policymakers to create competitive and a resilient sector that can address current and future challenges. We urgently need to move beyond parallel processes so that we can mainstream water, and notably into the 3 Rio Conventions. Water resilience should become a mandatory component of nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement and our national biodiversity strategies. In this way, We call for outreach towards the 3 Rio Convention presidencies to present clear outcomes on the integration of water in their mandate and action programs. Finally, we must be better at scaling proven frameworks. Existing successes like the European Union's Water Framework Directive demonstrates that integrated governance works when it is backed by law. The Water Convention is a proven framework to enhance transboundary water management, and the EU will support further rollout of the Convention. We also need to bring in coalitions such as the Freshwater Challenge, the Baco Dialogue on Water for Climate Action, and others that are already in place. But the European Union is fully committed to a future where water is robustly implanted and the foundation in a resilient multilateral order. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the representative of the European Union, dear Ambassador. So now I'm trying to get a regional balance of the world, and I'm moving to the other side of the world, from Europe to Australia, please.
Thank you. Excellencies and distinguished colleagues, Australia reaffirms its strong commitment to multilateralism. Yes, the system is under strain. We need to carefully consider how our collective efforts can be impactful and where to concentrate our actions. Water is life. It cuts across so many agendas, but we will not be successful if we cannot refine our priorities and bring together stakeholders through all stages of the journey. We must address the fragmentation of the water agenda and the crowded international calendar. We must look for ways to achieve political buy-in and build inclusive, participative governance structures to ensure water does not slip down the long list of crisis issues that are confronting governments. Australia strongly emphasises the importance of including perspectives and lived experiences from diverse groups, especially women, youth, Indigenous peoples, and those from small island developing states. Diverse voices lead to sustainable and effective solutions. The format and delivery of these interactive dialogues present an opportunity to set best practice for inclusive engagement, both now and in the future. To encourage increased representation, we should consider approaches to identify and address barriers, such as geography and funding access that prevent equitable participation from all stakeholders. Water is fundamental to the success of many other sectors. How do we get them to understand how important water is for their success? How do we break down the silos and bring them into our world and ours into theirs? Multilateralism is built on collective action. Co-designing sustainable solutions only works when all stakeholders work together. My call to action is, we must invite other sectors into this preparatory process so we can deliver on our promise of an inclusive, multi-stakeholder approach for this conference in December and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Australia. Now, I am again moving around the globe, and I'm looking at the African continent, starting off with Egypt, please, from Northern Africa.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to have the chance to speak in front of you, and I would like to thank also all the panelists for the very interesting and thoughtful discussion they had. A recurring message has been that international cooperation and collective action are no longer optional. They are essential. In a world that is becoming increasingly fragmented, where even the basic principles of international cooperation are under strain, the true measure of our success lies in our ability to strengthen the multilateral system, both in general and in the water sector in particular. Unilateral and unlawful actions on shared water courses, including projects undertaken without cooperation or compliance with international law, cannot be presented as a success stories in our objective if our objective is to uphold multilateralism and the rule of law. Strengthening the multilateral system requires a collective commitment to refrain from unilateral and non-cooperative actions and to respect agreed international legal frameworks. At the same time, our effort must deliver integrated, solution-oriented, and inclusive outcomes that reflect the realities of water-stressed and climate-vulnerable countries. This requires mobilizing partnerships and financing commensurate with the scale of the challenge so that when we reconvene in December, we can credibly demonstrate that multilateral cooperation still has the capacity to deliver solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, for this first round of member states, I would like to remain on the African continent and go further down to the south. Zambia, please. And we will have a second round for the member states. I beg you to stick to your time slot. I threatened you with the clock being displayed with the countdown. That is unfortunately not the case, but I will have to be strict, and I beg for your understanding because there are other important and interesting sessions today, so we have a little bit of time constraints here. Zambia, please.
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. First and foremost, we wish to express our appreciation for the insightful discussion and interventions on this interactive dialogue. As mentioned earlier on by many speakers in this forum, the African Union has designated the theme of 2026 as assuring sustainable water availability and sustainable sanitation systems to achieve the goals of Agenda 2023. This commitment already underlines the priority of the topic of multilateral processes for both our present and forward-looking development planning framework. This, we believe, goes beyond the continent of Africa. As you may all be aware, Zambia greatly supported the development of the Africa Water Vision and Policy through hosting of the Pan-African 3 Conference in the year 2025, and also our participation in various governance structures of AMCAO, which led to the development and approval of the African Water Vision and Policy by the 14th AMCAO General Assembly as part of working to cascade the global and continental water aspirations to the national level. We think that, my laptop has given up, let me just change, get this. We think that, just a second, my laptop has given up. Just push it a bit.
We all know how technical challenges can add on to other challenges.
Thank you. We think that water needs to be discussed, not only at a local and regional level, but also global. That makes this interactive dialogue so important. With interactive dialogue number 5, the global water community gets to build on the collective commitment of SDG 6, the 2030 agenda, and multilateralism in general. This momentum must not be lost. To sustain this momentum, a regular intergovernmental dialogue on water within the UN system beyond time-bound frameworks is necessary. 2026, as we all know, will be a very busy year for water and in many aspects fundamental to subsequent discussions on positioning and elevating water in global policy discourse. Like Germany and Mexico, Zambia will also be eager to start our process as co-chairs alongside Finland. We look forward to working closely with all the co-chairs to ensure that the dialogues are aligned and strive towards concrete and meaningful outcomes. We welcome close exchange, engagement with a co-host and the UN ADESA to ensure that we use the remaining time as effectively, efficiently, and inclusive as possible. Thank you. This is our submission from Zambia.
Thank you very much. Now, I see a lot of member states very interested in taking the floor. Bear with me, because first we're going to give the stakeholders a voice here. So this will be our first round of intervention, second round of interventions for the stakeholders. So for this round, we have pre-identified discussants, which makes it a little bit easier, less competition. And they will share their complementary perspectives, complementary to those of the panelists. And first, I would like to give the floor to Conor Redmill, who will report back from the one-day stakeholder meeting that took place on Sunday and is such an important voice for many stakeholders. He is from Te Kura Takapini, and please, I would like to give you the floor. Still just 2 minutes, thank you.
Thank you. Your Excellencies, co-chairs, distinguished guests, friends. My name is Conor Redmill. I'm from Kaitahu Māori from New Zealand. I work as a scientific advisor for Te Kura Takapini, and I am the stakeholder rapporteur for IDE. On Sunday, the stakeholders enjoyed stimulating and critical discussions about multilateralism. The participation and contribution from many high-level representatives highlighted the political importance of this dialogue. Today, I'll build on the momentum generated from the past 2 days by sharing 3 recommendations from the stakeholders. First, we recommend that Member States formally outline a multilateral engagement framework through the UN 2026 Water Conference. This will ensure the continuity of multilateral efforts, both at the local and international level. We suggest that a UN Water Conference be hosted every 3 to 5 years, alongside regular opportunities for monitoring, reporting, and learning. Each opportunity should encourage Indigenous peoples, youth, women, and other stakeholder groups to be active decision makers. Second, we recommend that all Member States and non-state actors ensure water is embedded as a cross-cutting priority at the top of international agendas. This would appropriately acknowledge the prominent role of water in connecting sectors, levels of governance, cultures, and countries, as well as the benefits of a coherent system beyond the 2030 agenda. Third, we recommend, we must celebrate the successes from the 2023 agenda and the ambitious vision we have created together over the past decade. The inherent complexity of multilateralism, however, will require us to develop a suitable method to monitor how water shapes multilateral processes across and beyond the agenda. Multilateralism is a requisite to achieve our shared, ambitious, and transformative vision, but we must use this pivotal opportunity now to get things right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now, moving on to Lesha Whitmer, who is an international expert on multilateral processes, as our next voice from the stakeholder community.
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you again, especially our host here in Senegal, for all your hospitality and help to quite a number of stakeholders to be here and have our meetings, just mentioned. I wanted to use a different type of language, so I made a wish list, and it's in bullet points. So bullet point number 1, we need to go forward with all countries talking to all countries, to all member states. But it means that we also need to create a more permanent way of involving all the different stakeholder groups. Because at the moment, yes, it's growing, but it's very ad hoc. And we need to be a little bit more structured and less improvising. The second wish I have is that member states talk to themselves. You have people in New York in the main UN system, but for instance, you also have people who are in the governing bodies of the different UN agencies and set their mandate. And it would be so helpful if already those members talk to each other, but also internally in the UN agencies, you talk to your colleague who works on agriculture and on energy and talk to them about water and water in the agenda. So let's start to be very practical and go and talk to the people who are probably working in the same organization or in the same building even. A third one is, yes, please, let's have at least one meeting a year where water is discussed, progress is measured, but especially new ideas can be discussed and massaged a little bit and acknowledged so that we are well prepared if we have the next, maybe some formal meeting. And last one, because I know that my minutes are up, I would really like to see that we do something practical in our international circuit. That is to look and say, for instance, we have standards in the world on really good practice on water management. Let's agree with all countries and all stakeholders that we're going to use those standards because it solves two problems. It's agreed language, another level than in the UN, but it's agreed language with the stakeholders, and we all know what we're talking about. So it's much easier to go from there and use that and enhance stakeholder involvement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lesha. And we move on to Gérard Payen from French Water Partnership.
Thank you, Mrs. Moderator. I represent the French Water Partnership, that is a broad coalition of ministries, local governments, private companies, NGOs, academia, and individuals. In this room, we all care for water. Since the adoption of the SDGs in 2015, we have been sharing and even co-owning a fantastic and invaluable asset. We all share 20 global water targets and a balanced and systemic vision of water-related challenges. This enables us to significantly increase our global knowledge on water, and it also enables us to align our thoughts and to work all together better. It also paves the way to the organization of 3 UN water conferences. Alas, these global targets and this shared vision may disappear in 2030, as it is likely that no multilateral agreement with so many ambitious targets will be found in 2030 to renew the current agenda. The obstacles are numerous. In our partnership, we are very frightened about this potential loss of our common vision and our shared targets. Losing them would be a significant step backwards. This is why we formulate a 2-step concrete proposal to mitigate this risk. First, at the conference in December, country governments should debate this threat in their Interactive Dialogue 5 and consider some preventing action. And second, during Spring 27, as a follow-up to the conference, the UN General Assembly should adopt a resolution on water that restates all the existing global water targets without linking them to 2030. The precise content of such a resolution is obviously debatable, but we believe that a decision is urgently needed not to lose our shared targets and our shared vision.
Thank you very much, Gérard. And now to a representative from the Major Group for Children and Youth from India, Ms. Rashana Mathur, please. Rashana Mathur, are you in the room? Somewhere up there? Okay, to my left, please hand a mic to Rashana. We're trying to find our way together. And I have to say that I'm really grateful that so many of you are bearing with us, even though we're so desperately running out of time. We really appreciate that and to see that as a sign of the enormous interest in our interactive dialogue. So please, Rashana, the floor is yours, hoping that at least one of the microphones up there is working.
Hello. Yeah. Good morning, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, and fellow stakeholders. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Rachna Mathur, and I'm speaking on behalf of Major Group for Children and Youth and Water Youth Network. As we enter the final years of 2030 agenda, this interactive dialogue on water in multilateral process is a timely opportunity to strengthen coherence, continuity, and accountability across global processes, building on the momentum from the 2023 UN Water Conference and the Water Action Agenda. Today, I would like to share 3 concrete actions and opportunities on how Major Group for Youth and Children is mobilizing for the 2026 UN Water Conference and how we can strengthen water across sustainable development agenda. First opportunity is to embed inclusion earlier, participation by design and not by correction. We hope to launch an open expression of interest for youth and youth-led organizations to join thematic working groups, preparatory spaces, and coordination mechanisms, prioritizing inclusion from the start by treating youth and children as co-producers of outcomes and not stakeholders consulted at the margins or after the fact. Second opportunity, invest early in capacity building. We need structured learning and mentoring ahead of 2026 UN Water Conference to enable young people to understand UN water processes, identify entry points for engagement, and prepare strong interventions, especially for youth from developing and vulnerable contexts. Third opportunity would be we propose developing a dynamic repository of youth-led solutions, including WASH initiatives. This can strengthen visibility, peer learning, and matchmaking with partners and funding organizations to continue beyond 2026 UN Water Conference. In closing, we invite collaboration from the UN system, member states, and all major groups, also the co-host of the 2026 UN Water Conference and co-chairs of the interactive dialogues, to work with us to turn these opportunities into actions to ensure 2026 UN Water Conference delivers ambitious, inclusive, and implementation-ready outcomes. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So now, if I've stressed already a couple of times, we are running out of time. Nonetheless, to keep the regional parity somehow intact, I would like to move back to the member states and look at the continents that have not been speaking up yet. And I would like to start with Indonesia, please.
Thank you, Co-Chair, distinguished delegates. Indonesia approached this dialogue with a clear view. Water must become a strategic pillar of multilateralism. It connects and unites agendas from the sustainable development, women empowerment and gender equality, disaster risk management, financing for development, health to human rights. In this regard, Indonesia would like to highlight several key challenges within the scope of this dialogue. First, on fragmentation. We have many platforms, many processes, and many declarations. This interactive dialogue must align and build coherence across the water initiative in different multilateral processes. Fragmentation limits our ability to mobilize finance, scale solutions, and deliver results across borders. On this note, Indonesia recognizes and supports the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy on Water's unique mandate to mobilize cooperation across the UN system and beyond. Second, on water as connector. Water must be embedded as a connecting thread across multilateral processes, not addressed in isolations. Indonesia believes that 2026 UN Water Conference must lay the foundation for coherent global water architecture with the UN at the center. We simply cannot afford further missed opportunities. This requires moving beyond business as usual to unify fragmented initiatives and mechanisms for water. The third, on the future of the water agenda, water risks are growing faster than our global responses. Climate change, urbanizations, population growth, and rising demand will intensify pressure on water system well beyond 2030. This requires a future-oriented multilateral approach, one that looks beyond current framework and prepares for the post-2030 development landscape. We must not only manage today's water crisis, but build systems for tomorrow's race. Co-chairs, distinguished participants, alongside our strong support for the UN 80 initiative, the Pact of the Future, and the vision of reimagining multilateralism, Indonesia stands ready to fully support the organization of this interactive dialogue, preparing for the future of multilateral cooperation with a clear water footprint at its center. Indonesia stands ready to work with all partners so that water becomes a true pillar of global cooperation and global governance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, I know there is still a lot of interest amongst the audience, and we really appreciate that. You might have already noticed that we've put up an email address on the screen because it won't be possible, unfortunately, to take up all the interventions on the floor today. So, as I mentioned before, I like to keep the perspective on the globe intact, and since I'm also representing Mexico here, I would very much love to hear a voice from Latin America. Colombia, por favor.
Merci beaucoup. Et la Colombie félicite les organisateurs de cette préconférence et à tous. Vous dites aussi bienvenue dans ce pays d'hospitalité à toutes les délégations et félicite la présence des États, mais aussi de la société civile. Et nous voulons partager avec vous que la Colombie est un pays qui a beaucoup d'eau douce. Mais qu'à l'intérieur du pays, cette eau n'est pas distribuée de manière uniforme. C'est-à-dire dans les aires de montagne, l'eau est contaminée. Et dans la zone de l'Amazonie et du Pacifique, il y a beaucoup d'eau, mais peu apte pour la consommation humaine. Et dans la côte Caraïbe, nous avons un désert, et c'est le désert de la Guajira. Ça fait que nous avons des enjeux liés à ce désert-là. Et pour le moment, nous gérons le partage de la gestion des fleuves limitrophes et de manière bilatérale. Et la Colombie observe avec un peu d'inquiétude que l'objectif de développement de 6 ne suivit pas la même dynamique de l'objectif, la même dynamique de débat et de rencontres qu'il y a autour de l'ODS 14. Et elle veut seulement rappeler que l'eau est essentielle pour la survie de l'humanité, mais aussi que c'est des objectifs qui dialoguent de manière directe. Et la Colombie croit que tout ce qui touche les affaires d'eau, c'est une affaire qui concerne l'Assemblée générale des Nations unies et pas le Conseil de sécurité de l'ONU. Et nous voulons aussi partager avec vous qu'au cours de la COP 16, de la Convention sur la biodiversité, nous avons fait connaître un manifeste très important qui s'appelle « L'eau comme bien commun universel ». Ce manifeste fait un appel à reconnaître les territoires. Il n'y a pas d'eau sans territoire. Il n'y a pas d'eau sans culture. Il n'y a pas d'eau sans savoir endogène. Il n'y a pas d'eau si on ne reconnaît pas l'importance des peuples aborigènes, des peuples afrodescendants et les rôles des sociétés paysannes. Tous ces acteurs qui participent dans la gestion communautaire de l'eau. Pour nous, est très important et reconnaître et faire connaître qu'en Colombie, il y a des expériences très importantes sur la gestion communautaire de l'eau. Alors, pour finir, la Colombie s'engage dans la gestion intégrée, intersectionnelle et soutenable des ressources hydriques, et de manière spéciale la protection des sources d'eau et la gestion territoriale des bassins d'eau, la promotion d'accès de l'eau, l'assainissement, l'amélioration de la qualité de l'eau et la réutilisation de l'eau et dans des eaux résiduelles. Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Merci beaucoup, muchas gracias. And therewith, I have to conclude the session here. I'm really, really sorry that we don't have much more time. And please don't see my selection of speakers as a pre-choice from the German or Mexican perspective. We want to hear all of your voices, and therefore, please send us your written interventions to the email displayed. We would very much like to take that into consideration. And I think we've had a lively and meaningful discussion, even though there's still room for much more, and I'm glad that we will continue on that path. So I'm really looking forward also to the zero draft of the concept papers, which will reflect what has been discussed here, will reflect what you will provide us with in your written interventions. And now, to finally wrap up, I would like to hand back the floor to my Vice Minister, Carsten Träger, for a couple of words of farewell, wrapping up the session. Please.
So, thanks a lot. Dear colleagues, thank you for the many valuable statements and ideas you've brought in. Of course, we have now to discuss with our friends and partners from Mexico, but now let me tell you first 3 key impressions I want to share with you. First, the discussions show that the issue is really complex. Our goal is to help navigate through this to achieve outcomes. Let us start working together to identify effective structures for our cooperation. Second, the water governance is truly cross-cutting. Discussions on multilateral processes connect with all interactive dialogues. We do our best to engage with all co-chairs and build bridges. Third, I sense a lot of interest in this issue. We have many stakeholders in the room today. This is a great starting point. It is a spirit of cooperation and dialogue we would like to help grow stronger over the next months. Having Mexico and all 11 co-chairs and the co-hosts by our sides makes us confident. We will do our best to be a good team player and make this dialogue a fruitful one. Senegal just won the Africa Cup. Mexico is hosting the World Cup soon. When Germany hosted the World Cup, our motto was, "A time to make friends." We will keep working on that. This time bring together all true friends of water. Let me thank on UN DESA and the co-hosts, the colleagues from the informal preparating working group and the stakeholder group on Dialogue E5E, and everyone who helped kick off our discussions. We are looking forward to working with all of you and towards a successful UN Water Conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Those were Germany's final words. And I have to say, I love the reference to soccer, football. I think it's a joint spirit. Football is a team sport, and water policy is also a team sport in that sentence. So, ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, our session today now has finally come to an end. And at the same time, it's the start of our joint journey, building on past achievements, designing a better water world. Yesterday evening, for the first time, all the co-chairs of the 6 interactive dialogues got together. And I can tell you, it was a tiny room packed with very motivated people. There was an intense spirit for joint commitment in this tiny room being reflected for all the themes of the interactive dialogues. Take the world with us. May I quote the Madam Vice Minister of Water from Ghana here. That's our main task. Go out of our water bubble, as the French environmental ambassador Barbara Pompili from France said, and has been reiterated today as well. And I would like to close, finally, with a word to our two hosts, to which we would like to extend our gratitude for making these intense days in Dakar en route to Abu Dhabi possible. As the Honorable Minister Balala said, we need to shock the system. And to conclude with the words of the Honorable Minister Sheikh Yeye from Senegal, we need to be game changers. Thank you very much to all of you for participating in this journey.
Can we take our seats? The session is about to start. Let me greet my co-chair. There are still people who are walking up and down. Can we be settled, please? Thank you very much. The House is now in order. Thank you very much. My name is Phemima Jodina. I'm the Minister of Water and Sanitation from South Africa. I'm co-chairing with my colleague over there, that beautiful young lady. Now you must fasten your seat belt. Boeing 737 is about to take off. And all of us, we have to be active in this session. I don't preside over any dull moment. I'm known of an international anthem on water. Clouds are gathering, clouds are gathering, clouds are gathering, clouds are gathering. You can't fold your hands and arms when clouds are gathering, clouds are gathering, clouds are gathering, clouds are gathering. Is raining, is raining, is raining, is raining, is raining. Thunder, thunder. We are about water. We are about water. Thank you very much. To my co-host. Thank you very much to the host of the UN Water Conference 2026. The year is now. There's no postponement, honorable ministers, there's no postponement. The year is now. We're on a countdown. From today, we are on a countdown to ensure that we host a very successful UN Water Conference 2026 that will be held in UAE. Let me appreciate that as host of two countries, you have invited us here in Dhaka for a tone setting, for a launch of a roadmap, so that all of us, we get ready to be active participants in the UN Water Conference 2026. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, I want to appreciate and welcome the vote of confidence that has been bestowed to us as the country South Africa as well as France, that we must co-host the sixth theme. A sixth theme which is very much important. A theme that cut across all other themes. As we focus this today on that theme, we must ensure that this round table serves as an enabler, because we can have all the plans, But if those plans are not supported by funding, they will fall. If we are to prosper in our development agenda, for us, we are to secure this planet, we are to serve the people of this globe. When we say water is for the people, water is a catalyst for socio-economic development. Water is life. That has been said several times. For us to achieve funding for SDG 6, we must engage with strategic partners, and some of them are just here in front of me. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not so sure if we think of or imagine of taking water to the highest level without funding, how is that going to happen? A few months ago, we hosted an Africa Investment Water Summit, wherein we're trying to say, where are our strategic partners? Can they come closer? Can we journey together? Because water is for socio-economic development. There's no development without water. Water visits each and every household. When we have not come to a household, it's going to be miserable in those houses. So that is why you are taking up this matter of water on a serious platform. Climate change as well as global warming is real. We have seen across the globe we are running out of water, and we cannot afford. Every drop counts is not just a phrase, but we mean it. Ladies and gentlemen, when we hosted the G20 Water Summit in Cape Town, in the context of saying all our leaders, all our heads of state must rise and make sure that water gets priority in all their state programs and objectives, because if we don't, we'll go back and the history is going to judge us very harshly. We're not going to do any hit and run. We're here, we mean business. We came all the way to Dakar, and as we leave this house today here, this auditorium, we'll be knowing exactly who is the strategic partner, who is coming forth to work with us. Excellencies, may I then invite my co-chair to come forward and welcome you. You're all welcome. Give yourselves a round of applause. At the back there, I don't feel you. I want to feel you. That's it. There you are. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's keep that spirit up. A round of applause for Minister. She was really great. Come on, you guys, you can do better. We want her to feel the love. Thank you all for being here. It is a true pleasure and an honor to co-share this roundtable and this discussion with you, my dear Pemi Majodina. And thank you for cheering the room. I'm sorry, I'm going to switch to French. Actually, I'm not sorry. French is important. I'm a Minister Delegate for Francophonie, so you have headphones. Please feel free to use them if you wish, but here we go. Excellences, Madame la Ministre, chère Pemi, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Mesdames et Messieurs les représentantes et les représentants, Mesdames et Messieurs, chers amis, je m'adresse à vous avec un sentiment certain d'urgence. L'ONU parlait il y a quelques jours de bankruptcy, c'est dire de faillite. Se laver, boire au robinet, arroser ses plantations, tous ces gestes essentiels reposent sur une ressource qui s'éteint en large partie partout dans le monde, et c'est l'eau. Et ça devrait nous inquiéter, ça devrait nous obséder. 410 milliards d'hectares de zones humides ont disparu depuis 1970. Plus de la moitié des grands lacs mondiaux ont décliné depuis 1990. L'ONU l'a décrit, vous le savez puisque vous êtes ici. Maintenant, il est temps que tout le monde prenne conscience. de l'importance de ce sujet. C'est pourquoi, face à ce constat, comme je vous le disais, je suis vraiment très honorée, humbled, comme on dit en anglais, de coprésider cette table ronde aux côtés de la ministre d'Afrique du Sud. La France porte une vision et des propositions concrètes qui visent à nourrir nos actions jusqu'à la prochaine conférence sur l'eau qui se tiendra aux Émirats arabes unis en décembre. Les travaux que nous menons ici, à Dakar, sont essentiels. Le Sénégal s'illustre d'ailleurs par sa capacité à développer des solutions pour la sécurité hydrique et j'aimerais les féliciter pour ce travail qu'ils ont accompli. Les coopérations qu'ils ont menées, par exemple, sur les bassins transfrontaliers nous prouvent que face aux défis de l'eau, nous devons répondre de manière multilatérale. Nous ne pouvons pas réagir en silo ou de manière nationale, ça ne marche pas. Nous le savons et c'est pour ça que nous sommes ici et parce que vous croyez au multilatéralisme comme nous en sommes convaincus. Il n'y a pas d'activité au monde qui soit sèche, qui ne consomme pas de l'eau. Même des choses qui peuvent paraître complètement abstraites et déconnectées, à la fin, si vous creusez un tout petit peu, vous verrez, il y a une ressource en eau quelque part. L'eau est au cœur de toutes les activités économiques. La sécurité alimentaire, bon ça c'est une évidence, la sécurité énergétique, les droits humains aussi, c'est extrêmement lié à la ressource en eau, la réduction des inégalités, la santé, n'en parlons pas, l'action climatique. Et l'eau sera aussi centrale pour ces sujets dont on parle aujourd'hui beaucoup dans ces instances multilatérales, l'innovation, l'intelligence artificielle. Il n'y a pas d'intelligence artificielle sans eau, hein, c'est assez simple, le numérique et j'en passe. Tous les secteurs économiques sont tributaires des évolutions du cycle mondial de l'eau. D'ici 2050, le PIB des États pourrait diminuer de 8 à 15% en raison de la diminution mondiale des réserves d'eau et du manque d'accès à l'eau potable et à l'assainissement. Et malgré ce constat, l'eau fait mondialement l'objet d'un déficit de financement et aussi d'un déficit de portage, de prioritisation politique. Et c'est aussi la raison de ces travaux que nous allons mener, Madame la Ministre, que nous allons mener avec vous tous aujourd'hui jusqu'aux Émirats arabes unis. Lors du One Water Summit, co-organisé par la France il y a un an, le président de la République, Emmanuel Macron, avait rappelé que pour $1 investi dans la résilience hydrique, ce sont 4 $ d'économies qui sont réalisées. Investir pour l'eau, c'est donc non seulement une nécessité absolue et vitale pour nous tous, pour tous les secteurs, c'est aussi en fait très rentable. Je me réjouis qu'en 5 ans, les engagements de l'Agence française de développement dans le secteur de l'eau et de l'assainissement aient augmenté de 30%, mais ça n'est évidemment pas assez. Nous devons saisir l'opportunité de cette conférence, de ces discussions, pour repenser nos modèles de financement. Et s'il y a un message que j'aimerais vous transmettre aujourd'hui, c'est qu'il faut réfléchir différemment, qu'il faut réfléchir de manière globale pour la question de l'eau et aller vers des politiques intégrées pour l'eau. Nous devons prendre en compte les besoins en eau de l'ensemble des secteurs économiques et réussir une véritable optimisation de la ressource. On ne peut pas penser de manière différente et différenciée tous les secteurs, le développement, si on n'a pas une politique globale sur l'eau. Et j'aimerais d'ailleurs saluer l'Afrique du Sud qui a une politique globale sur l'eau. Et j'aimerais saluer aussi les efforts que nous faisons en France et d'autres diplomaties font pour avoir une approche globale pour nous-mêmes et pour les autres dans notre coopération et dans le développement. Et c'est pour ça que ces discussions sont importantes. La conférence de 2026 doit aboutir à une vision conjointe. Toute stratégie nationale de développement doit intégrer l'eau de façon centrale, de façon primordiale, suivre le cours de cette eau pour développer toutes les autres politiques. Ça peut sembler une évidence si vous êtes ici, c'est que la question de l'eau vous intéresse, c'est que vous y travaillez de longue date. Ça l'est moins lorsque l'on parle à d'autres ministères, ça l'est moins lorsque l'on parle à d'autres partenaires. Et je pense que notre enjeu, notre objectif central aujourd'hui, c'est de faire en sorte que l'eau revienne au cœur des débats, au cœur de la réflexion, de notre développement et du développement de tous les autres. Ce dialogue interactif doit donc faire émerger une vision commune, des résultats clairs et opérationnels concrets. On a tellement d'idées, vous avez tellement d'idées, mais il faut que nous en ayons quelques-unes que nous pouvons porter ensemble, qui puissent permettre aussi à chacun des États de se l'approprier, parce que s'il n'y a pas d'appropriation nationale et de conception globale de l'importance de l'eau, on ne va tout simplement pas y arriver. Il s'agirait pour la France, et c'est ce que j'aimerais porter aujourd'hui, de parvenir à des modèles de plateformes pays, tels que les pactes nationaux pour l'eau proposés par la Banque mondiale, qui permettraient d'améliorer la coordination de l'ensemble des financements publics et privés en tenant en compte cette question centrale, la question de l'eau. Alors le processus préparatoire que nous enclenchons aujourd'hui doit permettre de réfléchir à l'ambition politique, aux réformes nécessaires pour une gouvernance intégrée de l'eau et la coordination stratégique de tous les acteurs, de tous ceux qui veulent agir dans ce secteur mais qui ont besoin d'être coordonnés. Alors, aux côtés de vous, Madame la Ministre, aux côtés de l'Afrique du Sud, nous estimons indispensable que ces travaux associent l'ensemble des secteurs clés du plus haut niveau. On parle des banques multilatérales et publiques de développement, en passant par le secteur privé, la société civile, les acteurs de la gouvernance locale. Vous, toutes et tous ceux qui nous écoutent et qui participent à ces discussions sont évidemment importants. Je me réjouis donc de voir une diversité d'acteurs réunis ici à Dakar pour ces premiers échanges et forme le vœu que nous parvenions collectivement à des résultats tangibles dans la route vers la conférence des Émirats. Je vous remercie. Et je vais tout de suite appeler sur scène, I'll actually do it in English, Mr. Alvaro Lario, President of International Fund for Agriculture, FIDA, and UN Chair for Water. Can you please give him a round of applause or else he won't come? To give his speech and introductory remarks. Alvaro.
Well, thank you very much, Minister, honorable ministers, dear friends. Let me start by thanking especially France and South Africa for taking this on board. And I think we see the importance of having two ministers co-chairing. So thank you very much, Madame Eleonore Carrois, Minister Delegate in charge of International Partnerships and Francophonie from France, and also to our friend Mrs. Pemi Madiodina, Minister of Water and Sanitation from the Republic of South Africa. I think having you here is already an important signal of the importance that you're giving to the conference. The UN Water Conference 2026 is taking place against a backdrop of growing climate shocks that we are all seeing, which are placing unprecedented pressure on water resources, water systems, food systems, and also on livelihoods. Humanity needs to become far more effective in managing water, and we need to do it so very fast. Water security is central to ending poverty and hunger and also building resilience, especially in the most vulnerable communities. Water runs across many sectors. In my capacity as chair of UN Water, we coordinate efforts across the entire UN system in sectors such, so diverse, such as health, meteorological services, science, culture, agriculture, public governance. But today I want to intervene on my capacity as president of IFAD, the only IFI focused on rural development and agriculture. So, as you know, especially agriculture accounts for the largest share of global water demand, and small-scale farmers produce more than 1/3 of the food that we consume in the world. At IFAD, we invest in coffee growers, dairy producers, small-scale farmers associations, communities, and water runs across all of our investments. We invest in developing smart irrigation solutions such as precision agriculture, drip irrigation, but also to strengthen capacity to adopt this to water. The scale of the challenge and of the investment we will be discussing today is massive. Today's annual investments in water infrastructure stand around $164 billion, whereas that's only 1/6 of the need of approximately $1 trillion per year. Small-scale farmers and rural communities need cross-sector, bankable and long-term investments supported by enabling water policies, institutional capacity and innovation. And this is why today's dialogue, interactive dialogue focused on investments, is so important. Let me take the opportunity also to briefly highlight 4 priorities. First, water security investments have to be cross-sectoral by design, as I was mentioning on the complexity, linking water resource management, irrigation, drainage, energy water systems, and ecosystem protection. Second, innovation and technology must go hand in hand with strong institutions, and also must always empower people. We're doing this for the people. Third, closing the investment gaps requires also tailored financial models. We talk about the what, but it's important the how, where we're talking about platforms like the minister was mentioning, public-private partnerships, de-risking mechanisms, or just concessional and blended finance. Third, closing the investment gap requires also, fourth, we must also build pipelines of bankable, climate-resilient rural water investments, turning the national commitments into scalable investment plans. So we are all looking forward to the discussion today to understand how these investment plans can be shaped. Let me finalize by saying that we're working with a lot of the partners here in the room, with the World Bank on Mission 300, with other multilateral development banks, with Agence Française de Développement, to connect really the big infrastructure to the local infrastructure and to the rural communities, the big dams to the local dams. Many times we just build the big infrastructure but don't always connect it to the people. That's where also IFAD and small-scale farmers come in. Together, a future, making possible a future that is water and food secure for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alvaro, for these words. I will now call the next, here we go. The next stakeholder, Ms. Michelle Gilles MacDonald, Executive Director for UNITAR. Please, Michelle, if you're done, please have a round of applause for Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our co-chairs for the session, the ministers from South Africa and also from France. Let me begin by, again, first just thanking UN Water and the government of Senegal for this important convening in the preparatory journey toward the UN conference at the end of the year, and also to appreciate the partnership with IFAD and the World Bank Group, who are our co-conveners for this interactive dialogue. This partnership brings together precisely what we have discussed over the course of yesterday, that the water sector needs, as a priority, a focus on policy leadership, financing, and the ability to move that finance where it is needed for water and water-related investments, and delivery capacity. Across regions, water investments stall or underperform, not because capital is unavailable, but because institutions are not able to prepare projects partners find investment ready or bankable, something my colleague from IFAD just mentioned. Also, utilities lack financial and operational capacity as they express them to us, and regulators lack autonomy, tools, and skills to perform their functions effectively. This is why Dakar matters, to look at the actions, decisions, and instruments we need, perhaps a reset in how we unlock investments for water. The core message I want to leave you with today is one we repeatedly came back to throughout yesterday's sessions, that capacity development is not a soft add-on. It is the missing investment enabler. In the water sector, capacity development is investable public infrastructure, just as essential as treatment plants, networks, or storage facilities. If finance is the fuel, then capacity is the engine that turns investment into impact. Yet, a structural problem continues to undermine our efforts. Capacity development under SDG 6 remains profoundly underfinanced and under-tracked. We know that achieving SDG 6 requires more than $1 trillion per year by 2030, US dollars. Yet current spending in developing countries is estimated at around 160 to 170 billion annually. The financing gap is well known. What is far less visible, but equally critical, is that there is no global accounting of how much of this spending supports capacity development. In practice, capacity development is rarely budgeted as a distinct investment category in national water plans. It is often absorbed into technical assistance or operating costs, making it invisible in reporting. And it is typically the first element to be reduced or cut when projects face fiscal pressure. As a result, While water-related assistance represents only 4 to 7% of total global ODA, only a small and largely unquantified fraction of that already limited envelope is dedicated to strengthening the institutions, the regulators, utilities, and to build project preparation capacity. That is the paradox we must resolve. And in this context, we strongly welcome the concept of country water compacts. Done well, these compacts can become a bridge between reform and finance, a framework to align ministries of water, finance, planning, and energy, and agriculture, and a platform to integrate capacity development, project preparation, and investment sequencing. UNITAR is ready to contribute to this big push for increased investments in water that this preparatory process and the conference seeks to inspire by translating reform ambition into institutional capability, building investment readiness across regulators, utilities, and local authorities, and connecting national efforts to global knowledge, peer learning, and South-South cooperation. For UNITAR, capacity development is not peripheral. It is our core mandate. Through the UNITAR Global Water Academy and the CFOL Global Network, UNITAR supports SDG 6 delivery through practical, localized learning. Our focus is on strengthening institutional capacity as a precondition for bankability, embedding learning into real investment and reform programs for sustainability and continuous improvement, not standalone training, and supporting the spread of solutions through South-South and triangular cooperation. So allow me to wind up with 4 clear asks. First, embed capacity development as a core financed component of water investment programs, project preparation facilities, and country water compacts. Second, prioritize new and innovative learning approaches, including micro-learning and credentialing, in a stacked approach to significantly scale up learning and capacity enhancement at both early career and decision-making levels. Third, use public finance strategically, incorporating water in an integrated approach to de-risk investments, to build project pipelines, and crowd in private capital at scale. And fourth, mandate clear next steps toward the 2026 UN Water Conference with defined roles, priority pipelines, and coordinated action across the UN system and financial institutions. If we want to mobilize finance at scale, we must invest where the returns are highest. And if we invest in capacity, water investment will follow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle, for those inspiring words. I will now call our last guest who will help us set the scene. He's Global Director for Water Global Practice at the World Bank. Please give me a round of applause for welcome Siraj Kumar Jha. Siraj, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Ministers. All courtesies observed, I'll quickly move into my points which I want to make. And I hope everything is working. Let me see. Yes, it does. Okay, so I'll have to look at this. So first thing I wanted to mention when we talk about investment is investment for what? Investment in water. Water is not even a sector of accounting in any country's GDP. If you look at the GDP data for a country, there's nothing called line water. Water is an input pretty much into every sector of the economy. That's where wealth is created, growth happens, job happens. So our narrative on water has to change. That water essentially is the fundamental input for creating growth and creating jobs. And as something which I have been saying since yesterday, water is not a threat and a risk multiplier. Water, if managed well, is a growth and opportunity multiplier. All your talking points starting tomorrow has to begin with this sentence. This is the language ministers of finance, the Prime Minister and heads of state want to hear. So that's my first message in this slide. Let's come to the situation we are in now. The reason I put these slides is because, as I mentioned in the initial briefing with the two co-chairs, is that every dialogue should be data-driven. Data should power dialogues. Evidence should drive conversation. Because water is a very divisive issue when it comes to investments. Is it public? Is it private? Can private sector do it? Are we privatizing social good? Are we privatizing public good? Very important to have a data-driven conversation. What you see here is that in a business as usual scenario, as of today, most countries in Africa will reach their sanitation SDGs not in the 21st century, 22nd century. Let's see more. You will see a hyperlink here. For the last 2 years, we have started tracking public spending in water by the different agencies. This is a live dashboard, funding a water secure future. If you do a Google, you'll go to this link. You can see how every country is spending on water supply, sanitation, irrigation, as well as water resource management, which is flood and droughts, etc., including water storage. What is the picture you get? You heard many speakers talk about it, the number, and this number will keep changing as going forward. I hope it changes, but the reality being that 93% of the money is coming from the government. Public sector, including in advanced economies, continues to be the largest investor in water. Let's keep that in mind, that investments, when we talk about it, it is not just suddenly asking private sector to come in a sector where public sector has been predominantly the largest investor. That is the reality today. 6% is ODA, which is bilateral and multilateral, including the World Bank comes in. All the MDBs together, we do about $20 billion roughly a year, which is a very small fraction of what is needed in the sector. Private is only 2%. The question we should be asking is that we've been talking about investments for the last so many years. Why is that number not changing? There's something wrong in the way water sector is managed, governed, priced, and valued, etc., etc., etc. And I think it's very important for this group to look at it. The reason I put this here is that the public sector has a very critical role in terms of prioritizing water sector spending. You are spending way more in other sectors. This has got to change. How you manage public finances in the water sector. There's a data which shows that every dollar that is given to water sector, they spend only 68% of that. 32% of the budget given to the water ministries is not executed. The current budgeting system. Lack of capacity, lack of readiness, lack of projects in the ministries of water, but that's the fact, is the data shows that. Since I have limited time, I'll move on. There's another statistics which shows the order of magnitude of financing that is needed in the sector. My God, look at the numbers. Sub-Saharan Africa, 17 times the current level of spending if you really want to be able to bend the arc of progress or lack of progress on water supply, irrigation, sanitation, and so on and so forth. There's the data also on the fragile, conflict, and violent affected countries, which I think is important because these countries are important for many of you, definitely a priority for the World Bank Group. So here we are. You've heard this number from many since yesterday. My point being that business as usual is not an option. For anybody in this room, the way you've been doing this so far, it will not work. It will not work. And that is my message to the Interactive Dialogue 6. The way you've been working, including the World Bank Group, it will not work. I think we have a very strong economic case, which I talked about before, growth and jobs, but I also believe we have a very strong business case. There are countries in the world which have shown that there is also a business case. It's a very busy slide and I have limited time. All that I want to say is that if you really focus on enabling conditions in the sector, which we have listed here, if you see here, I don't have something to show, but the point being that if you focus on enabling conditions, there is a solution for every market. There are markets which are ready to receive private capital on scale. Senegal is very close to that. I'll give you a quick number on Senegal. But there are markets which are not ready. Doesn't mean that you cannot bring private sector there. It is possible to create ring fence, a fully PPP project, even in the less mature markets. We have expertise within the World Bank Group, in other MDBs, other bilateral organizations. The point I'm trying to make is that we have a business case. We just need to focus on the enabling conditions which you have on the left. We'll share the slides, we'll put it on the screen somewhere. I'm being asked to rush. The UNITAR Executive Director talked about the Country Water Compact. This is something which, as World Bank Group, we are offering to the governments, that for you to go from X to 10X, which is capital 1 to $10, whatever your currency is, 10 times mobilization, you have to choose a path which is very anchored in serious reforms, policies, pricing, governance, different levels of government. And you really have to really address the entire value chain of reforms. And one way to do this is to have a compact, which conveys a very strong commitment of the government, but a compact which is not just merely an advocacy document, a compact which is very serious about fixing the pricing, fixing the governance, fixing the leakage, addressing the capacity concerns. That's the compact. You can call it by any name, but you need a policy framing of the government which says, this is my vision, this is where I want to go, and I'm committed to addressing these questions, policy, governance, pricing, regulation, and so on and so forth, and you'll see the magic. So this compact, World Bank Group is going to put its weight behind it as part of the Mission Water that our board has approved, will be discussed in the spring meeting. But I really think that we need some kind of a framing document to bring all of us together under the leadership of the government. When I say government at national level, but also local governments. Water is also a very local issue, the way they manage, so I want to recognize the role of the local governments. This is just a visual illustration that we all need to come together. Private sector should not be an afterthought. Bring private sector into country compact discussion on day one. They have a very, very good sense of the market. They have a very good sense of what will it take for them to come into your market. Regulatory challenges, pricing challenges, payment guarantees, country credit risk, all kinds of risks. Guess what? You have created institutions like World Bank Group or the African Development Bank. We have all kinds of de-risking instruments. We were created to manage risk. Use these institutions to de-risk and to be able to attract capital that is needed. This is just a visual of the World Bank Group water strategy. You have seen the slides. This is why I wanted to put this here because it tells you that we are making a long-term commitment to invest in the sector. And this is some kind of a visual illustration of how does country move from a low credit worthiness to a high credit worthiness, and what are the instruments to be mobilized to help countries access capital. Here is a Senegal example. It's a very interesting example. A long-term water security program starts with basically projects which are bankable but not financially viable because the cash flow is a problem. Senegal is using access to World Bank's concessional loan to provide the gap financing to make a private sector project, PPP, financially viable. Bankability is always not financially viable. So therefore, I think we can create innovative ways to attract capital. And if you see the path, by investing $800 million concessional money, Senegal will be mobilizing more than $1.5 billion private capital in this country. So there are ways to create pathways to mobilize capital at scale, to create impact at scale. There are other countries doing it, but I thought Senegal example, in my view, globally today is a model, is an inspiration for the World Bank Group, how countries can take the leadership and think long-term, address issues as you go step by step, and start bringing private sector into this. I'm sorry I've taken a lot of time, but I have mentioned to both the co-chairs, the World Bank Group is very firmly behind this interactive dialogue. Data-driven dialogue, evidence-based policies is what we need to change. Thank you very much.
A big round of applause for Mr. Jha. Thank you very much, Mr. Jha. The picture that you have just painted here, it is challenging all of us to do better, to do things smarter, to do things a little bit faster. Thank you very much. Let's thank all our three speakers. You have indeed challenged this session today here. You are saying we need visionary leaders to lead us in terms of ensuring that there is water security globally, You say to us, we need reliability of water. You say to us, there must be access of water. Let's break the inequalities that are there when it comes to water. Let's conserve water. Let's ring fence water sales to invest back to water infrastructure. Ladies and gentlemen, we also need accountable leaders when the private-public partnership has been agreed upon. We need leaders that are going to account. We need bankable and viable projects. We are reaching out to the private sector to come and join hands with government. We're reaching out to the civil society to come together. Let's make water, this precious resource, globally, to be accessed by everyone. There is no development without water. There is no industrialization without water. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's join hands in welcoming our moderator. Our moderator for today is Ms. Cecilia Akintomide. Let's give a round of applause to our moderator. Over to you, moderator.
Good morning. Great morning. And let's give a round of applause to our three presenters that have set the context perfectly for us and made my work easy. And now we're just going to go right into this deep dive to discuss this sixth theme, investments for water. Now, we all know we're behind on SDG 6. By 2030, at current rates, 2 billion people will still lack safely managed drinking water. 3 billion will lack safely managed sanitation, and 1.4 billion will lack basic hygiene services. And one thing that has been made clear is that we cannot have business as usual. And to discuss this path, the best path to go forward, we have an amazing lineup of panelists. They're all already seated, but I will introduce them. First, Alex Simalabwi. Alex is Chief Executive Officer and Executive Secretary of Global Water Partnership Organization. Alex. Paul Deverill, Senior WASH Advisor, Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, United Kingdom. Paul. Muchara Johannes Chirwa, Director for Water Development and Sanitation, African Development Bank. Adam Brun, Head of Office, Dakar, European Investment Bank. And Josiane Sluges, Managing Director, Aqua for All. Now, I'd like to start with you, Alex. The need is huge, the gap is real, and time is finite. And in this regard, also short. But we have opportunities. And in this context that we find ourselves, and as we prepare for Abu Dhabi and beyond, how do we create the right type of targets for increased investments that also reflect our huge ambition, as well as the fact that those targets must be realistically achievable. A tall order.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. And let me first of all start by thanking the co-chairs, as well as our partners, World Bank, UNIT, and IFAD, for an excellent framing and setting the context for this theme. And to the organizers, Senegal and UAE, thank you for inviting the Global Water Partnership to be part of this discussion. I think many of you are aware that the Global Water Partnership has been going under a transformation to really focus around working with countries to mobilize and transform climate resilience water investments. Today is quite instructive. Setting ambition. On 22nd March 2022, nearly 4 years ago, President Macky Sall stood right in this room, right where you are seated, Cecilia, in the closing plenary of the 9th World Water Forum, and announced a bold initiative we had never heard about. He launched an international high-level panel of heads of states to mobilize up to about $30 billion a year by 2030, and announced right in the closing plenary. Some of you remember where you sat on that day. I do remember I was sitting somewhere here when he announced. And many questions were being asked, is this realistic? How is this bold ambition going to be achieved? And coincidentally, nearly 6 months ago, the Honorable Minister here, Pemi Majodina, within the framework of the G20, invited global leaders to follow up on the ambition set by President Macky Sall right there, and she was able to mobilize between 10 to 12 billion in annual investment pipeline for the water investment program that Macky Sall had announced. They say you can only connect the dots by looking backwards. So I think by asking that question, Cecilia, I always say that the stars have a way of conspiring. And we have Saroj here as well, who has given a very, in my view, an excellent view in terms of what needs to change. And for some time, I was holding my breath when he was speaking. I'm like, but Saroj, the World Bank has not been doing a good job. Until he said, even the World Bank and everyone else, we have to change. And I have to say the same thing here. Even the Global Water Partnership recognized this over a year ago, and we are changing. I mean, Paul, you're one of our financing partners. You know what we're doing in the Global Water Partnership. We just changed our mission and reframed it from facilitating integrated water resources management, improving water governance, really important, to really focusing on what is missing, improving capacity, pipelines, and working with countries to see how we can de-risk. And finally, to be able to set the realistic targets, we must frame ambition that are based in the reality of the national context. Because each country is different. So we must have country-led processes and targets that are clearly linked to clear outcomes and with clear modalities that can be tracked. I am also facilitating on behalf of the Global Water Partnership, together with our partners, water.org, the stakeholder process for the UN 2023 process. And we had a meeting 2 days ago, and it was very clear in the room, I almost held my breath, the dichotomy of opinions. Very strong anti-private sector. We don't want private sector. They are robbing our people. People have died, with very good examples of some stakeholders in that room. And one group saying, no, how are we going to fund? The financing gap is so huge. Where is the money going to come from if we don't have innovation? Like, no, but innovation, government don't have the capacity. It's only the private sector. We can't have a water sector that is led by the private sector. Honorable Minister and the co-chair from France, I stood and said, you know what? Let governments be at the center of this. Because if we as stakeholders are going to go out and dictate to the investment community to say, you cannot go to private, we cannot bring the private sector, we cannot use this financing model. UN Water Conference is going to be a mess because there is going to be activists against private sector and private sector trying to run away. So we need to put country processes right in front, country-led processes. We need to set ambitions that are linked to clear outcomes and targets. 1 billion people, water mission is a good target. But I think probably we need to be more ambitious than that, because I think we can more, because there are over 2 billion people who have no access. So why 1 billion? Why not 2 billion? Why not 1.5? So we need to be much more broader. and recognizing that, yes, we have water challenges, as has been articulated, but the water challenge is a huge investment opportunity. If we look beyond the public sector and are able to find ways to bring in the private sector. Just as the Minister Majordina under the G20 and President Macky Sall were able to demonstrate. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Change we must, country-led processes, and we all have to change. Even the World Bank, even your organization, we must find new ways of doing what we do, and we must frame our ambitions in the realities of countries. And this brings us very quickly to the issue of reforms linked to the central role of government, because you say we have to put government at the center of this. And I'd like to come to you, Paul. FCDO is recognized for accompanying countries in their reform processes. So I'd like to hear from you, how can more governments support the enabling conditions to increase investments, including a focus on higher tariffs? That word has taken on new meaning. And taxes. And then there's a part B, what reforms would support more efficient deployment of public funds? So the types of reforms we should be looking at and how to support governments, and then the types of reforms that would support efficient deployment of public funds.
Thank you for that easy question. This is not going to be a deep dive. This is putting the toe in the water. And the first thing I'd like to say, which Alex has already mentioned, is, you know, I look around me and I'm totally confident that this interactive dialogue is going to work because we have the leadership and the right people, the right support in the room. And so I'm really confident and pleased to be involved in a small way.
But we'll push you in the water.
Okay, so I'm going to, immersing myself in the water. No, the first thing is leadership. I think you've mentioned it. Who hasn't mentioned it? Leadership is absolutely critical. Leadership at every level, but also political leadership at every level. That's why we're supporting the Heads of State initiative. That's why we're also working with the Global Outlook Council, the initiative of the African Union, and the work of the World Bank. Yeah. Clearly, under that leadership, we have a role to play, which is to support it, to encourage it, to help it, whatever, in a small way. Yeah. And one way we can do that, speaking from a donor perspective, I guess, is to align with others. The last thing we need at this moment is strong government leadership supported by fragmented development partners. I should also say that the UK is shifting its approach. Business as usual, not an option, says Saroj. We totally agree with that. We're moving from a donor, which is actually an outdated concept nowadays, really, if you look at those numbers that Saroj has presented, to one of an investor. And we will be investing fundamentally in that leadership. That's what we should be doing. We should have been doing it for years, actually, and so we've woken up, which is great. That leadership needs data and evidence, yeah, and the ability to actually understand and apply it, and that's where we can have a strong role to play. I was delighted to see the latest iteration of the Glass report and the work on means of implementation presented by WHO, because that's going to help understand what are the drivers of change that leadership can actually work with. Push those drivers of change should lead to better services, which are more affordable and inclusive to all. Higher tariffs. I'm not going to talk about higher tariffs. That's absolutely not my responsibility. It's the responsibility of an independent regulator set up by someone like yourself, Mom. Yeah. I would get toasted if I were to talk about higher tariffs. However, before we talk about higher tariffs, I think we've all got a job to do. The first thing is, let's talk about level of service. Why would I, a citizen of whichever country, want to pay for a water supply which is unreliable and produces dirty water that makes my family sick? We need to think about offering levels of service which people actually want to pay for. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And the other thing, which is to reduce losses in the system. Why should I pay more for water which comes out of a pipe where 70% of that water in some cases has leaked out before it even gets to me? What am I paying for? Leakages. Let's sort out non-revenue water. Same kind of applies to taxes. Why would I as a taxpayer want to pay for something when I think about the efficiency of the system, and the World Bank and others say that 70%, only 70% of the funds allocated to the sector are actually used. Why would I pay for that? We have a job to do there as well. And subsidies. I might be better off. That's great because I'm receiving the majority of the subsidies that we give to the sector. Whereas actually the people who pay most are the people who can least afford it. So these are aspects of our trade that we need to address, but do so collectively in support of national leadership, and that's the most important thing to take into account. And lastly, I'd just like to say how inspirational it is to be sat, probably for me it's the first time, actually next not just to two ministers, but two women, and a subject which is so fundamentally important to women that I actually feel a bit like an imposter sitting here next to you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Paul. I mean, you've highlighted the importance and the central and fundamental importance of leadership, and the fact that we should look at leadership as really the focus of our investments. Thank you very much. And putting things in perspective, the service has to be good. We must address issue of leakages. Fantastic. And so at this point, since part of the change involves our MDBs, I'd like to come to the African Development Bank. Johannes, so yesterday, the co-host reminded us that water is life, sanitation is dignity. And we've heard today also about the cross-sectoral and convergence importance of water. Investments must therefore reflect this convergence and cross-sectorality. Now, can you talk to us about how this impacts our choices of financing models? What sort of financing models should we be looking at that has that cross-sectoral impact and that convergence impact? This is a multi-part question, so can you also talk to us about the financing models that can very quickly be scaled up in this sector? If you could just add that.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, participants, ladies and gentlemen. Let me also first start by thanking the co-chairs, our honorable ministers from South Africa and France, for hosting us in this interactive dialogue, but also recognize three key speakers, colleague Saroj, Michelle from UNITAR, and also the speaker from IFAD for setting the tone. Yeah, the point you raise, Cecilia, is a fundamental one, because as we all know, water should really be seen as both a social and economic good. I think Saroj talked at length about how we must change the narrative to frame water as an enabler of growth, but also a creation of jobs. That is clearly the case. When we are looking at financing the sector, there are a number of considerations that have to be taken into account. First, you have to consider the capital investments that are required to finance a particular objective or undertaking. So you need to consider where are those resources coming from and how can they be applied effectively to achieve the objective intended. The second aspect is the operations and maintenance cost that will be incurred by the utility or the authority that will manage the delivery of service. Paul just spoke about quality of service. This is essential, and I'll come to that a little bit later. On the other spectrum, it is really how does that operator ensure financial sustainability of the operation, so collecting revenue and ensuring that they can apply that revenue to sustaining a quality of service that is commensurate to the expectations of the clients. At the same time, as you framed the question, you said water is a right and sanitation is dignity. So we need to consider the clients or the end users of the product and whether they can afford the service. And we're talking here about tariffs. At what cost do they need to pay or in order to access the service? So fundamentally, at the downstream recipient, you have principally two types of users of the service. You have commercial users, and this includes agriculture use or industrial manufacturing. You have domestic users, and then at times you also have municipal use for firefighting and etc. So the pricing of water has to ensure that it's fair for those three segments of the community. We need to take into account communities that are disadvantaged or that cannot afford a particular level of tariff. So your financial model should take into account all these elements. At the top end, trying to blend financing, to bring concessional financing into the mix so that you can lower the cost of the final tariff, but also using various sources of financing. Saroj talked about public sector being the biggest source of financing. What can the public sector bring into the cost structure? Do we have MDBs or international financial institutions or development banks financing? And what concessionality do they bring? What will that mean into the cost of operations? And we talked about efficiency just now. How do we ensure that the operator operates efficiently, is using technology to monitor water flows, to reduce waste, ensure that the cost of water can then be delivered at the right price? So all these parameters, I think, has to be taken into account in designing the model for a particular investment.
No, thank you very much, Johannes. And there's something that Suraj touched on and you also have touched on very quickly. Now, water is considered a high-risk investment, usually, rightly or wrongly so. How do we address this issue of perception of high risk? One. Two, what de-risking instruments can we start to look at? I mean, there are issues, you talked about the revenue. A lot of times you have the situation of revenue in local currency, liabilities in foreign currency. So let's talk about those de-risking instruments that we should be looking at.
Thank you. Actually, yes, risk can either be a perception or real. Okay, so I think an investor wanting to invest in a service has to consider such risks. And these risks could be at a macro level, so country level risks, but also at the sector level. So at the sector level, the whole aspect of governance is one way in which we can reduce the risk, ensure that the governance of the sector is clear, with roles and responsibilities clearly defined, with institutions that have the right leadership. I think previously we talked about the importance of leadership, and that they have technical people running them capable of doing their job. The regulatory framework must be very clear on set level of standard in terms of service delivery, but also pricing. How is the pricing regime managed in the country? I think an investor would be concerned about being able to recover their investment and how the cost of water will be determined. So this must be very, very clear to reduce the risk. For a financier, we are able to offer instruments that can help to reduce risks. Some of those instruments that we have, and the World Bank and other MDBs have the same, partial credit guarantees that will ensure that a lender has some recourse in the case of default in servicing the loans for investment. We also offer partial risk guarantees, which provide cover for some forms of default from the government and so on. So there are ways to lower the risk, but it's important to classify them. Country level, what needs to be done, sector level and project level risks, and be able to present a case that is financially viable and sustainable over the long term.
And I think the good news really is that the instruments already exist. And that is definitely good news. I'll very quickly want to come to Adam. So Adam, technology and innovation bring speed, scale, impact, and efficiencies, all of which we need to change the narrative. Will you talk us through innovative service delivery models and/or technologies that can be scaled effectively in the sector?
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting the European Investment Bank to this session. Maybe I will talk from the EIB's perspective and our experience, and just to take a little step back, the EIB, we are the Bank of the European Union. We are proud to be the largest multilateral development bank financier in the water sector. That includes, of course, investments inside the EU. And we are also proud, of course, to be part of the wider European Union family. I think the European Union is the largest grant donor to the water sector in the world. I would like to say that in 2025, EIB, we adopted a new strategy which intends to increase our lending to the water sector by 50% over the next 2 years out to 2027. This is part of our President Calvino's focus and emphasis and recognition of the importance of the water sector, as we've heard, and we all know how important it is for the economy, for economic growth, and so on. I would like to say that we have 3 priorities, of course: access, resilience, and innovation. We, as we've heard from the other speakers, we know that water is inextricably linked to all the other sectors. We heard Saroj mention it: energy, transport, agriculture, all the sectors that are so important for developing countries, not only developing countries, but also developed countries. So we also know from World Bank's presentation how enormous the financing needs are. So the question, I guess, is how can we catalyze capital? Because I think there's no shortage of capital, really. It's a question of how can we crowd in investments not only from multilateral development banks, grant funders, but also the private sector. I think it's very poignant to note that how little the private sector is involved in developing countries. I think that our experience within the European Union can say a lot about how to crowd in the private sector, and we have many different models suited to individual country needs that are proven.
And if your strategy for investment in the water sector, innovation is one of the pillars. How are you driving that innovation pillar?
Yeah, so I think when we talk about innovation, I think if you look at the EU, I think the EU countries have a majority of water sector patents in the world. So we are also, in a more upstream manner, supporting research, development, and innovation within the European Union. We have teams, technical teams, focused on the water sector who work both inside the EU and outside the EU. So we're able in that manner to cross-cultivate the experience that we have, not only with respect to technology, but also with respect to what financial models actually work. So I think that's very important. I think when we talk about investments outside the EU in developing countries, we try to emphasize that technology may not be the first thing that one should look at. It is important, of course, but it's more about the enabling environment. It's about putting in place proper regulatory structures, independent supervisors and regulators that are free from too much political influence. I think that's very important. We know that works inside the EU, and certainly it can be adopted with some goodwill outside the EU. I think this is really the most important thing, regulation, and also having in place an enabling environment in terms of laws and implementing regulations that encourage the private sector to invest through, an environment that is transparent, but also very predictable. We have to recognize that investments in the water sector are long-term. If a private sector investor wants to invest, he or she needs to also have a very long perspective and reassurance about that his or her investment will be safe for the long term.
Thank you very much. And we have saved the best for last as we round up our conversation. And this has already come up. I think it was the intervention by Michelle where she talked about the importance of capacity. And capacity building, whether development of capacity, acquisition of capacity, or ensuring investment readiness. So I'd like to come to you, Josiane. What approaches or strategies should we be considering when it comes to the issue of capacity, given its game-changing importance?
Thank you so much, and also thank you, Your Excellencies, and maybe most of all, everyone here that also embraces the topic of raising private capital for a very important thematic area, not a sector, as was mentioned before. Aqua for All understands that public and philanthropic capital is not enough to bridge the financing gap, and that's also again why we started to use the funding that's committed to us by the Dutch government, Swiss government, and some philanthropic organizations to be used in a very catalytic way. So we leverage the funding that we have at hand through not only working with private enterprises that we support in their scaling pathway to become either bankable or investment ready, we also work with financial institutions across countries in Africa and Asia to really support them in building up portfolios. And I think it's extremely important because both on household level, on SMEs, but also on infrastructure, we all see that there's this huge demand for private investments. So what we do is once we start to work with a bank, indeed also work on capacity building for the bank, for them to be ready to actually start lending from their own capital. And so this is a very close collaboration that we have with many financial institutions, I think at this point in time in almost 15 countries. But then again, if you want to actually speed this up and to make sure that water becomes a mainstream asset class that is of interest of many investors, we also decided that we needed to start working with asset managers. Not only asset managers that provide debt or equity to financial institutions, but also asset managers that provide private equity in companies directly. And so yesterday I think we had the excellent example of the story of Water Equity, one of the most famous asset managers that actually works in this space, but there's also many others. And if we start to talk about scaling our efforts in that sense, I can reassure you the appetite amongst asset managers is there. We just need to make sure, and then, feeding back into the question of capacity building. Capacity building is often always associated with enterprises and so on to support them. But I think the fact that many of the investors didn't see a track record in this industry, or if you can call it an industry, but anything linked to water, also made us realize that we needed to work with them very closely on having them understand what the risk is, but also how to price then their investments. But then again, we also understand that we just don't want to commercialize everything related to water, because it's so extremely important across the world for everything that we do. So in guiding those asset managers, we also are very dedicated to make sure that we agree on making sure that they realize impact results. So it's both capacity building and catalytic capital that we provide. The catalytic tranche that we invest in then allows asset managers to raise more private capital for their funds. And because of all the work that we do and the understanding and working with a multitude of asset managers resulted in a very interesting collaboration with the CEO Water Mandate. Their corporate members actually also commit and understand why it's so important to start investing off their balance sheets for water, because they feel it in their value chains. So water is not only, as many of us are also focused on access to drinking water, it's on all the nexuses of agriculture and energy and so many others. So what we have launched last week in Davos, and I think the CEO of the Pacific Institute that hosts the initiative is also here, is that we announced that we're going to work jointly on setting up a global investment water facility to make sure that we cater for the corporates to be able to pool their senior capital into a vehicle that we then start to deploy amongst many different asset managers that either target infrastructure or nature-based solutions or agriculture, but anything related to water. And I'm going to close off with my ask, and that also points out to the remark that Saroj was pointing out to us. The DFIs, the World Bank, we need to start calling upon their risk appetite and to work with their tranches that they can actually de-risk these kind of very important initiatives. The pledge that the corporates have done is 2 billion by 2030. So that's substantial. Let's make sure that we actually put this money to work, because, we all know how important that is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And this is where we round up on our discussion with the panel this morning. And great insights on capacity building, great insights related to the fact that we need to see leadership as part of our investment target. We also must make sure that the services we provide are services that are of good quality. We're addressing issues of leakages. And capacity building is not just focused on the country systems, but even our investors, our asset managers. They have to understand the business of water to be able to invest in that sector. So thank you very much, everyone. And I'd like to hand over now